Okay, hello, how are you? I believe we're recording. It's Tuesday, June 17th. No, Tuesday, June 7th. Right, this is the second video for this week. This is week two. Okay, so I I wrote some guiding questions and topics and subtopics for a new discussion board on Descartes. And I'm hoping that yesterday you saw the video from yesterday, whenever you watch it. This is asynchronous, so you can watch these things whenever you want, but you do have to do the work, and I would like to get it in on time. I can only really do the feedback if you get it in on time. Anyways, right, so yesterday I did a video on Descartes Meditation 1. Today I'm going to review that a little bit and then um, um, continue that into meditation too. We are going to sort of focus in on a couple of issues. Descartes handles a lot of things. It's kind of a deep argument. I believe the writing is simple and you can understand it and you can follow it. You will be writing a short discussion board about it, and you may use some of this for your researcher's inquiry. Um, and hopefully you'll be able to use some of it for your other writing. Okay, so before we go into that, I just want to encourage or repeat that the May 31 video, McAdams on narrative identity, I think is worth checking out. The first video is a shorter video with an interview that goes over his main points. I would watch that one. The second video is longer. You could skip, if you follow the timestamps, you could skip ahead because it starts off with a long discussion of a book that he's talking about, right? Which you may or may not want to see, right? So if you look at the timestamps there, but his idea of narrative identity, it's not identity groups. It's really a personal identity that you create based on a narrative that you write. You create a narrative of yourself, and he goes through different ages, as a child, as a teenager, and then sort of as a young adult, how that in developmental psychology, this is sort of how we do it, how we create an identity based on a narrative that we tell of ourselves. So obviously this is related to the Junot Diaz, his trauma, right, and his fictional sort of mask of being a macho guy, right, with lots of girlfriends, et cetera, et cetera. And it brings up the question of masculinity as mask, femininity as mask, which we talked about or you looked at, right? So we're still working on that. Okay, so please take a look at the McAdams narrative identity videos. The first one is short, the second one is longer, all right? Um, okay, so we're moving ahead now, right? So Descartes Meditation 1, right? Review, right? So again, the point of this is critical thinking foundations, all right? So Descartes is forced to ask a question about um, what can I really know, right? A lot of things that I believe turn out to be false, right? So what is the firm foundation? What's the rock bottom reality that I can base everything else on, right? And he goes through a long analysis. He says everything can be doubted. This could be a dream. You can't trust your senses, right? You can't even really know for sure that mathematics is true because there's a possibility that God is an evil deceiver and God may not even exist, right? If God doesn't exist, then how can I know that 2 plus 2 is 4? It probably is, but is there a 1% chance that it's untrue, that it just seems to be that way? Well, he entertains that possibility, right? Really, he entertains the idea of God as an evil deceiver, right? Really to get at the doubt that exists or that's possible to apply to mathematics, right? Does a triangle, is the shortest uh, distance between 2 points a straight line? Well, obviously it is, and that seems to be true unless God is an evil deceiver and has created us in this weird way that we think this, right? So his question is, what is the ultimate reality that I can sort of know for sure? And then can I base everything else on that, right? And he finally comes to the question of, even if everything I think is false and everything I see is distorted and is not 100% trustworthy, and even if math is doubtable because God might be an evil deceiver, nevertheless, my consciousness, I'm thinking about these things. I'm doubting these things. Therefore, I exist, right? So he comes to this sort of rock bottom foundation that I exist, right? Now, immediately we see how revolutionary this is, right? And this is 1618, right? We talked about this, the scientific revolution is happening, also theological problems, right? Religious wars, right? So if you say that I exist, and that's the basis of all my thoughts, you're already saying that God is not the foundation for me, right? In fact, I am the foundation for God. I must exist. My thoughts, my beliefs, my visions must exist. I must exist before my idea or vision or belief in God can exist, right? You see? So you can see how radical and revolutionary this is, right? And he was censored, et cetera, right? So this belief, and it's also, this is considered to be the origin of what we call the modern world, right? Which is based around this idea of modern subjectivity, science, right? That rational sort of consciousness is the ultimate arbiter of what's real and what's not real, right? But you notice here in Descartes, it's a little bit different than that. He says that nothing else can really exist unless I exist, right? Right. Now, many of us truly do believe this, really, right? Think about it, right? When we're walking around, we sort of say, well, if I weren't here, would any of this exist? Well, maybe it would, but who cares, right? So on the sense of like this personal sense of, 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 my reality, right? My reality exists for me, right? That really comes out of this, what we call modernity, right? The modern world, right? You know, so, um, um, and then we use the example of COVID, right? I'm repeating myself here, right? So the idea of COVID, the doubt of COVID created this uncertainty and anxiety that I think, at least for me, sort of, this is why I started going back to Descartes, is that I had a friend who was really kind of freaking out because he just couldn't figure out what was really going on. He was just like, the anxiety, uncertainty was driving him insane. And I thought to myself, wow, and I was feeling it too, really, right? Because you don't know for sure, right? How dangerous is the virus, right? Does the vaccine work, later, right? All this uncertainty, you just can't know at the time, and you start to get it's like gaslighting. It's like somebody's gaslighting you, so you don't know what's real. See, this is this question of critical thinking foundations, right? What is real? Right? What is the bottom line of what is real? For Descartes, what the bottom, rock bottom reality, the rock bottom, what is real is I exist, right? Whatever, even if I'm hallucinating, dreaming, right? Um, believing something that's totally false, right? I exist because my consciousness exists, right? Okay, so that's part one. Now we go to meditation two, all right? So if you look at meditation two, there's various things in there, and I do refer to it in the discussion board. But I want to focus in on one thing here, right? And that's when he says that, okay, well, right, I think, therefore I am, I exist, right? So I know that for sure, right? I'm seeing a chair, I'm looking at the window, I can see the bricks, the sun on the other side of the street, right? Um, um, Maybe that's really an illusion, but I exist, right? My thinking exists, right? My consciousness now exists, right? Then he says, well, what is this I? What is this I that exists? What is this I that thinks or that is conscious, right? And he says it's not the body, right? Because the body is really could be doubted, right? Yes, we believe that, that's generally what we believe, that I am the body, right? But he says that you don't really know that for sure, right? In fact, the only thing you really know is that I exist and that I have consciousness and awareness of this present moment, right? Um, but what is this I beyond that, right? And he goes through this long argument of, it's not really a long argument, it's one page where he talks about the wax. He talks about the wax of a candle, right? And he talks about a candle melting. And he says that, well, just like the candle is standing tall, it's skinny, and then I burn it, and then an hour later it's melted down and it's all warm and it's gray and it smells different and it's all a puddle on the table, and then 2 hours later that puddle on the table will get hard because it's the wax cools off, right? So the wax is different at all these different times, right? It looks different, it smells different, right? It's a different height, it's a different skinniness, fatness, it's flat, it's hot, it's warm, it has a different color, right? But we still have the, we still make the judgment that the wax is the wax, that the wax is there, right? And he says that the I is like that, right? So it's a very funny argument, actually, right? Because he wants to say that despite all the things that I'm thinking now that, oh, I'm looking at my fingers, now I'm touching my forehead, now I'm moving my glasses, right? Now I'm looking at a mathematical possibility that the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line, right? I'm thinking all those things, right, at any given moment, right? But just like the wax changes all the time, so too do my thoughts change all the time, right? I can look out the window, I can look up, I can look down, right? So, but the I that thinks, right? The thinking, the consciousness, right? Is this just like the wax, right? So it's sort of like a weird analogy, really, but that's his analogy, that it is some kind of substantial reality, this I, right? Now, let's look at some other points here. First of all, right? First of all, you notice that the I that thinks, right, does not have a gender, right? It does not have a class. It's not rich or poor, right? It's not French or German or English or Arabic or Chinese, right? It's just pure consciousness in the present moment. Okay, right? Now it doesn't even say that what it's perceiving actually exists, but it exists, right? And this is the I, right? And what I want to try to put forward and propose as a way of thinking about this is that the I think, which we call this for Descartes, we call this the cogito, which means I think, right? The cogito, the I think, is the present consciousness of now, right? And it's a unique, right, present consciousness of now, right? And it's and it compared to the present consciousness of now, the future is just an imagination, right? It doesn't exist, right? And in a way, the future will never exist, right? Because when I get to the future, it will be the present now, right? And in the same way, the past no longer exists. Yes, we have memories of the past, right? We talked about narrative, right? How do we create a narrative? Does the past really exist, or do we make it up, right? What about trauma? What about abuse, right? Yes, I admit it exists, right? But we're talking about this idea here, that if we look at this in terms of critical thinking foundations, the only thing that actually exists that we know for sure is the present moment now, my consciousness, right? And I think that that is the most radical formulation of the foundation. I don't know if it really helps us that much, but it does stop us from having this sort of anxiety of insecurity, of gaslighting, right? I mean, you could I suppose the only right, because I guess it would be another level of gaslighting if you were to say, well, maybe I don't exist, right? Maybe this consciousness now doesn't exist, right? Or how about this, that this consciousness now exists, but what I am is just a set of masks that I've adopted and put on, whether I'm Chinese, whether I'm, a guy, a gal, right? A professor, a father, uh, a baseball player, right? A salesman, right? A politician, right? Whatever I am, right? A beautiful woman, right? A beautiful woman wearing a wig, a beautiful woman wearing with makeup, right? Whatever I am is somehow in between all of those things, right? And we can't really say that, is it really a core reality? It looks like from Descartes that there's really no core reality, you know. Um, yes, he says there's a substance like the wax, but it's still mysterious what that thing is, and it doesn't have, it's not an object, right? Like a pencil or a pen, right? Or the best example I have is like an empty glass with nothing in it, or a window frame that you look through, right? There's nothing there except what we see through it, right? Or the empty glass, there's nothing there but what we will put into it and then pour out of it, right? So, um, so that's the idea for Descartes, relationship to masks, right? Relationship to what am I, right? And what we're trying to do is look at critical thinking foundations. How does that help us? Does it, in some ways, does it make it more confusing? It's possible that it makes it more confusing, right? I'm aware of that, right? On the other hand, right, if you do not have a foundation, right, how are you going to get to the ultimate reality of what beliefs you have, right? If you just say, for instance, that, well, I'm gonna believe that God exists and God tells me X, Y, or Z, that doesn't really work, does it? Right? Like, for instance, with the vaccine or with COVID, right? God doesn't tell you whether the um, uh, whether the virus was real or not, or whether it was safe to go into a crowded restaurant, right? I mean, at best it would be somebody who's supposed to be speaking for religion, saying, "Oh, don't be afraid, just go," or if you die, then it'll be okay because you'll go to heaven, right? But that doesn't really give you. I mean, it can act as a foundation, really, as your belief. It's true, right? In a way, the belief in God is a foundation if you believe in it. But you notice that for Descartes, he goes one step below this, that you have to exist beforehand, right? No. Okay, so we're going to leave that for now. I think we've done about 15, 16 minutes. That's about the limit. Okay, so take a look at the reading, read it carefully. Look at my announcements. I have comments in my announcements, and I have questions in the discussion board. Um, and if you turned in your paper from last Friday, you have comments, and the second draft is due this Friday. I've opened up a Turnitin for that, and I've opened up a discussion board for tomorrow, or for today. You can start doing that. And also tomorrow we will be doing the conference hour, 9:30 to 11. That's Wednesday, 9:30 to 11 on Collaborate Ultra. Okay, thank you very much. Have a great day.